The twin moons of Therion 4 cast a pallid glow over the cityscape of Dravantes Prime, their light bouncing off damp steel and cracked ferrocrete. Callan Ward, still in his rust-streaked exo uniform, trudged through a narrow maintenance corridor between two towering cooling stacks. His shift as an atmospheric technician had run long 12 grueling hours, spent recalibrating the upper strata wind turbines. His boots scraped against the stained ground, and his breath came out in visible puffs. Even though Dravantes wasn't a frozen world, the night cycle always brought biting wind from the highlands, sweeping through the vertical alleys with a mournful howl. Callan just wanted a hot meal and his narrow bunk back at his unit, but then he heard a sharp metallic clatter coming from the shadows just past the vent recycling units. Maybe a rodent drone had shorted. Maybe it was a scavenger. Either way, it wasn't his problem. He should have kept walking, but he didn't. Instead, he paused and tilted his head. Something about the sound, it wasn't random. It was desperate. Curiosity or maybe some buried instinct tugged at him. He turned on the headlamp mounted on his shoulder rig and stepped forward. A discarded med cart used mostly by clinics for transferring patients or bio-waste was wedged against the wall. Blankets were piled inside, soaked and matted, but the contents were unmistakably not medical waste. There, huddled in a trembling ball, was a figure unlike anything Callan had seen outside the interstellar diplomatic archives. Slender and curled tightly into herself, she shimmered faintly under the lamp's beam. Her skin was a subtle opal hue, semi-translucent, and scattered with pulsing bioluminescent nodes along her arms and neck. Silken hair, pale like liquid moonlight, stuck to her cheeks and collarbones. Callan took a step forward. "Hey, can you hear me?" The figure flinched and lifted her head slowly. Her eyes caught the light like polished glass, wide iridescent and ringed with glowing teal. "They said I wasn't viable," she whispered. Her voice was soft, musical, but strained, like it took every ounce of energy just to form the words. Not worth the strain on medical allocations. Callan frowned. His gaze shifted to the logo on the soiled fabric draped across her shoulders. Corthex Medical Citadel, a renowned alien-run institution known for its precision diagnostics and sterile indifference. "You're a patient?" he asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded, trembling. "I was discharged, but I have nowhere to go. They locked the exits behind me, left me here." Disgust coiled in Callan's gut. He pulled off his thermal jacket and wrapped it around her carefully. She was light too light, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Sarael," she murmured. "Of the Vire Ka." Callan helped her sit upright against the wall. The Vire Ka? He'd read about them during tech school. Photosensitive empathic, rumored to bond through energy resonance. A species rarely seen off-world, much less in a dingy back alley in the middle of a corporate colony. His rational brain ticked through possibilities. He couldn't take her to a human hospital, cross-species care was limited, and Cortex likely flagged her as non-compliant or bioincompatible. But he knew someone, Dr. Nix Barrow, a xeno-veterinary specialist on the lower decklands. Unorthodox, absolutely. But Nix didn't ask questions, and more importantly, she never turned away a living being. "I think I can help," Callan said, sliding an arm under Cyril's back. "We'll get you somewhere warm and safe." She hesitated, but eventually let her head rest against his chest. As he carried her through the alleyways, his pulse beat louder than the wind around them. They reached the tram line just as the last maglev for Dockward Sector 9 screeched in. Callan stepped aboard, ignoring the wary glances from the few night passengers. One old man muttered something about bringing aliens into public transit, but Callan's glare silenced him. Cyril barely moved, though her fingers occasionally twitched against his jacket, and her glowing skin flickered in patterns he couldn't decode. He wasn't sure what those colors meant. Fear, pain. Both the tram lurched forward. Callan tightened his grip. Nix's clinic was wedged between a defunct parts warehouse and a street vendor that sold noodle packets with questionable protein sources. The glowing sign above her doorway read, Barrow Biocare. All species considered in a dozen galactic tongues. He pressed the call pad. A moment later, the heavy blast door cracked open, revealing Dr. Barrow herself, tall, broad-shouldered, with asymmetrical cybernetic eyes that flickered between modes every few seconds. "Callan Ward," she said, hands on her hips. You're either in trouble or bringing me something fascinating. Judging by what you're holding, probably both. I need help, he said. She was dumped outside Cortex. They said she wasn't worth treatment. Barrow's expression hardened. Bring her in. Inside the clinic was a mix of sterile surfaces and cluttered genius. Tanks of unknown aquatic creatures bubbled against one wall. Holographic readouts scrolled across the ceiling. A robotic arm clicked overhead as it moved tools into place. Serial was placed gently on the biobed. Nix's scanners came alive. She's very calm, all right, Nix muttered. Bioluminal sync markers still active, but her energy pathways are destabilizing. She said they called her non-viable. Callan said, jaw clenched. Nix snorted. Because they're too lazy to calibrate their diagnostics for nonlinear energy resonance. Idiots. Serial stirred. Will it hurt? No, Nix said gently. But it may tingle. As Nix began her analysis, Callan stood back and watched. Despite the strangeness of it all, meeting an alien species, he'd only read about holding her like she might shatter. He didn't feel overwhelmed. He felt calm, focused, connected. Serial's eyes met his. You shouldn't have stopped in the alley, she whispered. I couldn't not, he said simply. You mattered to me the moment I saw you. Her light flared subtly but beautifully along her cheeks. It was the beginning of something neither of them yet understood. But it would change everything. The clinical hum of Barrow BioCare hummed softly, a strange harmony of advanced diagnostics and old-world bedside care. Callan paced near the wall as Dr. Nix Barrow ran her scans. The main display pulsed with shifting data in alien script and translated overlays. Her core pathways are misaligned, Nix muttered, adjusting her toolset, like trying to force incompatible data streams through a fractured node. Whatever Cortex did or didn't do left her on the edge of systemic collapse. She said it's some kind of energy disorder, Callan replied, fists clenched. Can it be treated? Yes, Nix said. But not easily. Not with what I have on hand. On the table, Serial lay still, eyes half-lidded, her luminous skin dimmed to a faint shimmer. But Callan noticed her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. Nix leaned forward, her synthetic eye rotating inward, with a soft whir. You've already formed a link with her, haven't you? Callan blinked. What's she's Vireka? Their nervous systems are intertwined with empathic field sensors. Their species evolved to form resonance bonds with those around them. It's not just communication, it's energetic, symbiotic. Callan glanced at Serial. She said something about resonance, but I thought it was just metaphorical. It's biological, Nix said, tapping the display. And right now, you're the only thing stabilizing her. Her field is syncing to yours in real time. That sounds like a problem, Nix snorted. No, it's a blessing, but it makes her dependent on you, at least temporarily. You're acting as a surrogate energy regulator. She straightened, brushing her gloves off. We'll need a permanent solution, though. What does that look like? She swiped a panel, bringing up an image, a cluster of glowing aquatic plants, each undulating with bioluminescent pulses. Thermic flora, she said. Specifically Kevlin spores found in the geothermal vents of Lunaris Rift, a sub-oceanic trench on the moon of Alaris 7. Callan squinted. That's a restricted world. Because of industrial salvage rights and seismic instability, yes. But the spores carry an ionic trace signature that harmonizes well with Vireka energy flux. It might be the only thing that can reset her system without rewriting her physiology. And how would we get it? Nix raised a brow. You volunteering? Yes. Serial stirred. Her fingers flexed against the sheet, and a faint blue wave of light ran up her arms. He shouldn't have to do this for me. Callan crossed the room and crouched beside her. You didn't ask me to. I want to. Their eyes met, and Nix watched the energy monitors spike, not in alarm, but in harmonic sync. Great, the vet said. A full empathic resonance this early. You two are ahead of schedule. That night, Serial rested in Nix's auxiliary room, more storage bay than medical suite, but warm and private. Callan sat nearby watching her sleep. He'd expected this to feel stranger than it did. He was just a tech, a wrench turner, not a rescuer, not a protector. But somehow none of this felt wrong. Even as exhaustion clung to his limbs and doubt gnawed at the edges of his thoughts, he knew with certainty this wasn't something he could walk away from. Callan Sarael murmured, eyes still closed. Yeah, she turned slightly, her bioluminescence dim and calm. Thank you. He hesitated. I didn't do anything. You didn't leave. That apparently was everything. The next morning, Nix handed him a data stick in a worn military-grade satchel. These are your maps, she said. Flight paths to Alaris 7, entry coordinates to the rift, and contact info for someone who owes me. Pilot Nix smirked. Tessa Rowe. Smuggler racers sometimes pain in my ass. But if anyone can land on a seismic moon without triggering every orbital satellite, it's her. Callan took the satchel. And you trust her? Trust hell, no. But she'll get you there alive. Cyril sat in a nearby chair wrapped in thermal layers. Her color had improved, and her eyes were sharper. How long will you be gone? Callan opened his mouth, then paused. Depends. Could be 3 days. Could be a week. Cyril looked down. That's a long time to stay stable. Nix cleared her throat. Not if you take this. She produced a thin bracelet with thin circuits embedded along its inner lining. Biofrequency replicator, she said. It won't replace Callan's presence, but it'll mimic enough of his resonance to keep your system from collapsing. Cyril took it with reverence, slipping it onto her wrist. You really think this will work? It's better than waiting for Cortex to rediscover compassion, Nix said flatly. Callan crouched in front of her. I'll be back with the spores, and when I do, we'll fix this for real. Her fingers brushed his cheek, leaving a faint glow. Be careful, Callan Ward. Your light, it's rare. And with that, they parted. Drovantis Skyport Terminal C was a storm of noise and movement. Callan felt out of place with his patchwork gear and grim purpose. He followed Nix's instructions to Hangar 47B, where he spotted a woman leaning against a repurposed cargo freighter painted with flame decals and cosmic graffiti. Tessa Rowe, he called. She turned, flipping a wrench in her gloved hand. Short-cropped hair, dark goggles on her head, and a grin that belonged to someone who regularly outran patrol ships for sport. You must be the guy with the death wish. Callan raised a brow. That's me. Good, she said, tossing him a satchel of gear. Let's go piss off some corporate moon patrols. The ship named the Fire Whale shook as it breached atmosphere. Tessa handled the controls with the bored precision of someone who preferred chaos. Callan sat in the co-pilot seat, fingers clenched, eyes fixed on the stars outside. You in love with her or something? Tessa asked casually. Callan blinked. What, that girl? The one you're getting death spores for? He hesitated. I don't know. Maybe. Tessa snorted. Well, that's cute. Dumb, but cute. Callan didn't reply. But deep inside, he knew something had already shifted between them, him and Sarael. Whether it was called love or resonance or something entirely different, it was real, and he was about to risk everything to protect it. The descent into Alaris 7's atmosphere was less of a landing and more of a barely controlled fall. Engines stable-ish, Tessa Rowe muttered as the cockpit shook violently. Radiation shields holding. But I wouldn't schedule any reunions just yet. Callan gritted his teeth as the harness dug into his shoulders. Through the cockpit window, jagged obsidian ridges reached up like the shattered bones of a planetary god. Lightning forked across the purple-gray sky, illuminating bursts of thermal vents below. Beneath that fractured surface lay the Lunaris Rift, a deep-sea trench filled with geothermal energy. And if Nix was right, the Kevaline spores. Callan clutched the padded satchel of retrieval gear Nix had given him. Oxygen filtration exodive suit, sample vials thermal mesh. Everything he needed. Almost. Tessa grinned over at him. You ever dive into a vent basin before? Nope. Good, she said, voice bright. Then you'll be too scared to do anything stupid. They landed hard in a natural alcove hidden beneath a volcanic ridge. The ship's sensor cloaks engaged with a low thrum, hiding them from any orbital satellites still left behind by Cortex's industrial watchdogs. Outside, the air was thick with pressure and ash. The ground vibrated faintly with the tremors that plagued the moon. You've got about an hour tops before those quakes go from inconvenient to catastrophic. Tessa said, handing him a stabilizer beacon. Drop this at the surface. It'll keep your route locked and get you back in one piece. Maybe. Callan sealed his helmet, voice crackling through comms. You're all optimism. I aim to inspire. The Lunaris Rift was deeper than he imagined. His suit's built-in lighting system barely pierced the inky waters as he dropped meter after meter into a world of dark silence. Tiny creatures swam past his visor, some glowing faintly, others blinking like dying stars. No human had any business being here, but Serial needed this. She needed him. At 200 meters, the thermal signature spiked. Rift chamber ahead, he muttered to himself. The HUD highlighted the rough terrain. Vents belched mineral-rich steam into the frigid abyss. And there, clinging to the jagged stone, was the prize. Keveline spores. Their glow was unmistakable pale green tendrils that pulsed in rhythm with the heat. Delicate, bioluminescent, unbelievably alive. Callan activated the extraction module and began carefully collecting samples. His heart pounded. The spores drifted slowly into containment vials swirling like luminous ghosts. 5 collected, then 6. A tremor. The trench wall to his left cracked. Not now, he breathed. Another quake hit stronger. The seafloor erupted as a nearby vent ruptured. Pressure surged around him, shoving him back against the trench wall. His stabilizer beacon beeped wildly, warning of seismic instability. Callan clutched the satchel tight and activated the emergency ascent tether. He was going up. Fast. Back aboard the fire whale. Callan peeled off his suit, breath ragged. Tessa handed him a towel and an oxygen shot. You cut it close, she said. I was ready to dive in after you. I got the spores. Tessa glanced at the glowing canister in his hands. Good. Let's get off this rock before the next quake turns us into stardust. They left Alaris 7's orbit in a silent sprint, barely clearing the gravitational well before another tremor destabilized the region's upper atmosphere. Callan sat in the crew quarters, knees bouncing. The spores pulsed gently within the containment case. He activated his comm. Dr. Barrow, he said, I have them. I'm en route. Nix's voice came back, sharp and clear. Good. You'd better hurry. Serial's condition is deteriorating. The replicator's no longer holding the field steady. Callan's blood turned cold. How bad she's trying to suppress the flux spikes herself. But her system wasn't designed to operate solo. You've got 12 hours before her pathways fail completely. I'll make it, Callan said, rising. We'll get there. Tessa poked her head into the corridor. Bad news, he nodded. Then let's make this ship scream. 8 hours later, they touched down on Drovantis Prime. The sky was painted crimson with the morning storm front. Nix was already waiting with a grav stretcher and 2 drones at the private landing pad. Callan ran alongside them as they brought Serial, now unconscious, her skin pulsing in jagged, erratic waves, into the clinic. The warmth of her hand was fading fast. Start the protocol, Nix barked. The spores were refined in the next hour, Nix using biotech filters and thermal converters to distill them into 3 shimmering doses. The process was invasive, risky, but it was the only chance. Callan stayed at her side, holding her hand as Nix administered the first dose. A moment later, Serial's body tensed, then stilled. Her luminescence dimmed for a breathless second, and then began to glow again, calmer, smoother, rhythmic. Callan let out a shaky breath, squeezing her fingers. She squeezed back. She's stabilizing, Nix said quietly. You did it. Later in the silence of the recovery room, Callan sat by her bed, exhausted but unable to rest. Serial stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. You came back. I told you I would. She looked at the IV delivering the second dose. Her hand found his again. I could feel you even when you were gone, like an echo, a warmth. It kept me holding on. Callan looked down at her, emotion rising in his chest like a tide. You're safe now. I'm more than safe, she whispered. I'm alive. Because of you. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the bond that had once flickered as survival now burned with something much deeper. The dimmed ambient glow of Dr. Barrow's recovery suite flickered gently as twilight fell across the spires of Drovantis Prime. Within the silence was warm, soft beeps from monitoring equipment, the low hum of power flow regulators, and the slow, even rhythm of Serial's breathing. She was finally resting without pain. The third dose of the Keveline treatment had stabilized her completely. Her skin glowed softly now, not in frantic, jagged pulses, but in harmonious waves that seemed to reflect something internal, something healed. Callan sat nearby, legs stretched, fatigue hanging from his limbs like soaked cloth. Yet he couldn't sleep. Not yet. She opened her eyes. Hey, he whispered. Serial blinked, then gave him a small smile. I had a dream of flying stars and someone pulling me back when I drifted too far. Callan chuckled under his breath. Was I that someone? You always were, she murmured. Even before I knew you. Her fingers twitched. Callan reached out and gently laced his fingers with hers. The monitor showed a small spike in her resonance, gentle, steady. I don't know how any of this works, he admitted, but I know it feels real. It is, she said. In Virika culture, a full resonance bond is rare and sacred. When two life patterns align like this, they create a stable harmonic field, a permanent one. Some call it fusion of light. Others, she hesitated, call it love. Callan's throat tightened. Is that what this is? Her skin flushed faintly violet along the cheeks. I believe it is. Nix entered, carrying a tray of nutrient packs and medical logs. She set them down, glancing between the two. Well, she said dryly, looks like I'm going to have to register this clinic as an official fusion witness site. That's paperwork I don't need. Callan raised a brow. That's a thing, Serial laughed softly, her voice like rain over glass. It is. But not required, Goodnix muttered. Because if the Vireka Council gets wind of this, they'll be sniffing around here, asking for genetic resonance records. She turned serious. You two may not realize this yet, but what's happened here is going to attract attention. Serial, your recovery defies expectations. Your species isn't supposed to survive failed energy cascade events, let alone fuse with another species during recovery. Serial sat upright slowly. You think they'll come for me? I know someone will. Cortex doesn't like being proven wrong. And if the Vireka elders get word that a human, she pointed at Callan, formed a confirmed bond with one of their kind, the political ripples could knock over whole alliances. So what do we do? Callan asked. Nix shrugged. Lay low, disappear, or go loud and control the story before they do. Sarah looked at Callan. I don't want to run again, but I also won't be used. Then we need to move, Nix said. I've got contacts. There's a neutral station in the Perseus Fringe. No Vireka oversight, no Cortex presence. You two could start there. Callan leaned forward. What about your clinic? I'll manage. I always do. But if you stay here, someone will come knocking, and they won't knock twice. 2 days later, the fire whale was fueled and ready. Tessa Rowe grinned as she adjusted the navigation plots. So, lovers on the run from intergalactic health policies and socio-political dogma, I've smuggled worse. Callan raised a brow. We're not fugitives. You keep telling yourself that. Cyril stepped into the cockpit, now dressed in a composite jacket and tailored travel wear, her posture stronger than Callan had ever seen. She looked radiant, healthy, whole, and every time she looked at him, her skin pulsed with soft light, visible only to those who knew how to read the signs. He'd learned to read them. They left Drovantis Prime under fake registry codes and a silenced transponder. Tessa's ship sailed smoothly through the fringes of controlled space and into the uncharted stretch known as the Perseus Drift. Callan and Cyril shared a private cabin aboard the fire whale, more of a storage closet with beds, but to them it was a sanctuary. Each night Callan felt her warmth beside him, and each morning her light reflected on his skin like dawn breaking through shadow. It wasn't just physical, it was resonant. During the journey, Cyril began teaching him about her kind, about how the Vireka viewed the universe in frequencies and wavelengths, how they sensed trust and deception as shifts in energetic texture, how they love through synchrony rather than words. You humans carry your emotions like fire in your hands, she said one night, watching him solder a broken console, blazing and unpredictable, and yet somehow beautiful. Callan smiled. We don't always know what we're doing with them, but we try. You tried for me, she whispered. You didn't give up. I never will. As they approached the Perseus Fringe, the nav beacon blinked red. Tessa scowled from the cockpit. That's not standard. What is it? Callan asked, moving to her side. Distress signal. Weak local band. Civilian frequency. Looks like a science vessel caught in a gravity shear near the outer asteroid ring. Cyril entered behind him. We have to help them. Tessa raised a brow. We're running for our lives. You want to go play rescue? Serial's light shifted slightly, a warm, deep hue. When someone is thrown away, we save them. Isn't that what started all this? Callan met her gaze. He nodded. Tessa rolled her eyes. Fine. But if I get shot at, you owe me a month's worth of repairs. Deal, Callan said. They altered course toward the asteroid ring. What they found was a drifting ship half embedded in a dense gravity eddy, slowly being pulled apart. The call was faint but unmistakably desperate. Life signs, Callan asked. 2, Tessa confirmed. Barely stable. Callan turned to Serial. Can you handle the EVA equipment? She gave him a look that clearly said, you saved me from death, and you're questioning this. Let's go, she said. The vacuum outside the fire whale's airlock was a black canvas studded with asteroids and twisting light from the gravity eddy. The damaged science vessel, an older civilian model, drifted slowly. Hull plating peeled back like torn paper. Warning lights blinked faintly beneath layers of scorched metal. Callan clipped his mag boots to the hull of the rescue sled, double-checked the canister of emergency sealant foam, and pulled his helmet tight. Pressure stable. Comms live. Confirmed, came Tessa Rowe's voice through his helmet. You've got 20 minutes before that eddy shifts again. After that, I can't guarantee your way back won't fold in half. Next to him, Serial slid on her helmet. Her eyes glowed faintly behind the visor, and the bioluminescent shimmer beneath her skin pulsed with a calm blue rhythm. Focus, Callan had learned. Vireka could regulate their nervous systems to dampen fear. It was impressive and beautiful. She gave him a nod. Ready. The sled launched silently, magnets disengaging from the fire whale with a gentle hiss. They glided through the void toward the crippled vessel flares on the sled, lighting up its battered exterior. Callan tapped the side of his helmet. Scan shows a breach near Deck C. That's our entry. Looks tight, Serial noted. Good thing we're stubborn. The interior of the vessel was a chaotic mess. Wires hung like vines. Frost coated the corners, where life support had failed and gravity was intermittent. The emergency beacon led them to a sealed compartment just behind a collapsed corridor. Callan pointed. Behind there. They cleared the debris slowly, magnetic tools slicing through twisted metal until they reached the pressure door. It was cracked but intact. Inside were 2 survivors, a woman and a child, both human, both unconscious. Serial's field flared as she scanned them. Alive. Hypoxia and cold exposure, but salvageable. Then let's not waste time. They wrapped the survivors in thermal vac suits and secured them to the sled. As they moved back through the wreck, another tremor rippled through space. The gravity eddy flared again, pulling at the hull like an invisible tide. Eddy's shifting, Tessa warned. You've got 90 seconds to get clear. Callan cursed under his breath. We're moving. They kicked off with boosters at full burn. The sled shook as gravitic forces clawed at it from all sides. The fire whale's docking bay grew larger in his visor, so close the sled clipped a stray piece of debris. One of the tethers holding the child snapped. Callan Serial shouted. He didn't think. He lunged off the sled, catching the small bundled body with one hand, stabilizing with his other on a maneuvering thruster. The gravitational turbulence yanked them hard, threatening to spin them out into the asteroid field. Serial activated her own thruster and surged toward him. Their hands met mid-vacuum, and she pulled them both back to the sled as the fire whale's outer doors slid open. Inside, gravity slammed back into place. They made it. Tessa sealed the bay and pulled off her goggles. You people are going to give me a heart attack. Callan collapsed beside the survivors, panting. They alive, Serial pressed 2 fingers gently to the woman's neck. Pulse returning, respiration steady. They'll recover. Callan looked at the child, a boy no older than 5, now wrapped in an emergency blanket, skin pale but peaceful. We did it, he said. Serial met his gaze. Because we didn't turn away. Later, after the survivors had been stabilized in the medbay and given food and oxygen, the woman finally stirred. She blinked up at Callan and Serial. You're not authorities. Nope, Callan said with a small grin. Just people who didn't like seeing others left to die. She looked down at the boy, her son, and her face crumpled. Thank you. I thought we were done. Serial offered a warm smile, her glow radiating comfort. You're safe now. The woman studied her. You're not human, no, Serial replied gently, but I chose to help you. That's what matters. The woman reached out and squeezed her hand. Then thank you. From both of us. A day later, they reached the Perseus Fringe, a scattered collection of orbital habitats and unaligned settlements at the edge of civilized space. Tessa docked at a mid-tier station called Mira's Echo, known for privacy, quiet, and fewer questions asked. As Callan and Serial stepped onto the docking platform, something in the air felt lighter. Free. They had made it. Not bad for a maintenance tech and a girl from a back alley, Callan muttered. Serial laughed. That's how all great stories start, isn't it? They checked into a small private residence dome. No questions, no biometrics, just old-fashioned key codes and hard currency. The room was small but clean. There was a window that showed the curve of the station's artificial horizon. That night, they sat in silence under the stars beyond the glass. Serial's light pulsed slowly along her arms and neck, the same deep frequency she'd shown the first night they met. Callan reached out, taking her hand. I never asked, he said quietly. What does that color mean? She looked down, then back at him, her eyes glowing gently. Trust and longing. He swallowed. And if I wanted to respond, she leaned in, lips brushing his cheek. Just be here. That's enough. And he was. Far away in a cold council chamber on the Vireka homeworld, a data stream pulsed to life. An image of Sarael glowing alive, bonded, flashed across a screen. Analysts whispered, elders conferred. What they have done, one of them said, should not be possible. But it is. Find them. Life aboard Mira's Echo Station was peaceful, at least on the surface. Callan and Serial had settled into their small dome unit, an efficient living space with recycled air-filtered light and a rare luxury privacy. They'd spent the last 3 days adjusting to station life. Callan picked up repair jobs at the docks, patching filtration units and reactor valves for under-the-table credits. Serial, now fully stabilized, ventured into the community slowly, always hooded and cautious. Her bioluminescence was subtle now, under conscious control, but it still made people stare. Still in a fringe station full of smugglers, exiles, and forgotten wanderers, stares rarely turned into questions. And for a time, it felt like they'd found a kind of peace. But peace has a short half-life when secrets burn too brightly. On the 4th evening, Callan returned from the docks to find Serial standing by the window, her posture stiff. What is it, he asked. She didn't turn. Someone's watching us, she whispered. Callan's heart thudded. He stepped beside her and peered into the hallway outside their unit. A silhouette moved just out of view, then vanished. You're sure I felt it, she said. The frequency. Wrong. Too focused. Callan immediately pulled the emergency kit from beneath their bunk, checking the contents. We need to be ready to move. Serial placed a hand on his arm. There's more. He turned. I had a dream, she said. Or a vision. In my people's way, we sometimes receive echoes from those we're bonded to. Not just thoughts. Warnings. What did you see? A void, she said softly. And a symbol I haven't seen since I was a child. The sigil of the first flame. It's the mark of the Elder Assembly, the Vireka ruling body. If they're involved, this isn't just political anymore. Callan sat down slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. They're coming. They went to Tessa Row. The pilot had docked 2 platforms over in a maintenance ring where fewer questions were asked and more deals were made under flickering light. She raised an eyebrow as she let them into the Firewell's cockpit. You're early. Something's changed, Callan said. Serial's picking up resonance interference. We think the Vireka assembly found us. Tessa groaned and rubbed her temples. I knew this story had legs. I should have dropped you both on a farm planet and called it a day. Can you check the station logs, Callan asked. Docking records. Any Vireka ships or Cortex affiliates? Tessa slid into her chair and began tapping commands into the console. Sure. Let me just access highly classified registry data from an interstellar coalition on an unregulated station with the processing power of a blender. No problem. She paused, then blinked. Well, hell. But Callan leaned in. There's a ship docked 2 levels down. Registry says it's a diplomatic courier, but cross-reference the engine signature and it's a Vireka enforcement vessel. Stealth class, ghost drive. Not something you send for a polite chat. Cyril's hands clenched. Tessa continued. They've been here 2 days, docked quiet. No crew registered leaving, but I'll bet credits they're walking the halls in someone else's face. We have to leave, Callan said. Problem, Tessa replied. They'll be watching my ship. It's the only one fast enough to break orbit without clearance. If we try to launch, they'll shoot us down or jam the jump drive. Serial looked up. Then we'll need to make them look somewhere else. They spent the next 4 hours planning the distraction. It was Cyril's idea to tap into the station's maintenance grid and simulate a power surge in the reactor core, enough to trigger a full-scale evacuation protocol. Every security eye would turn inward. In the chaos, Callan and Serial would sneak aboard a different outbound vessel booked under stolen credentials Tessa's contacts could procure. Tessa stared at the plan. You know this is insane, right? Yeah, Callan said. But so was bringing a dying woman to a vet. Tessa grinned. Fair. The night of the escape, Serial stood beside the central maintenance shaft, hands resting on the power conduit's edge. Her fingers glowed faintly as she synced with the station's electromagnetic grid. I can feel the pulse, she murmured, like a sleeping animal. Just don't wake it too hard, Callan said, crouched beside her, linking wires and adjusting valves. We want chaos, not implosion. She smiled faintly. Trust me. A few minutes later, the power grid howled. Lights across Mira's Echo flickered violently. Emergency sirens blared. A voice echoed across the station, reactor stabilization failure. Evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. All across the station, people began to run. Dressed in service uniforms, Callan and Serial slipped through the corridors, pushing a supply cart filled with innocuous cargo and their real belongings hidden beneath. The cargo freighter, the Hollow Current, waited on Dock Bay 6, scheduled for departure in under 10 minutes. As they moved, Serial suddenly gripped Callan's arm. Behind them, in the panicked throng, a figure moved against the tide. A tall Virika male, clad in sleek black. No glow, no emotion, only purpose. Go, she said. What you run? I'll slow him down. No, Callan said, seizing her arm. We stay together. But the agent was closing the gap. Serial turned, her light flaring bright, a defensive spike of energy that slammed outward like a wave. The crowd staggered. The Virika agent faltered, shielding his eyes. Callan pulled her forward. Now they dashed through the emergency doors just as the Hollow Current's ramp began to close. The captain, a grizzled Drekton with a datapad fused to his forearm, gave them a suspicious look. Callan flashed the forged ID. Special delivery. Last-minute clearance from Maintenance Authority. The Drekton grunted. You'd better not be smuggling weapons. No weapons, Callan muttered. Just two people looking for a new place to breathe. The ship pulled away from Mira's Echo just as two Vireka ships broke dock and powered up pursuit protocols. But the freight ship's jump drive had already activated, spitting it into the black between stars. Safe for now. In the quiet cargo hold, Serial collapsed into a crate, breathing heavily. Callan knelt beside her. You okay? She nodded, sweat on her brow. He was trained, a field agent. I recognized the stance. What would they have done if they caught you? They wouldn't have asked questions. Callan exhaled. Then we're not done running? No, she said, but we're still free. Their hands found each other in the dark. And despite the danger, despite the unknown, they still glowed, two lights against a sea of shadow. The cargo ship Hollow Current drifted through the vastness between star lanes en route to an uncharted orbital hub known only as Station Keros. It wasn't on any official registry. It didn't need to be. If you had something to hide or someone to protect, Keros was where you disappeared. Callan leaned against the bulkhead of the small sleeping chamber they'd been granted by the freighter's gruff captain. Though the lights were dim and the room was insulated from engine hum, sleep wouldn't come. Across from him, Serial sat cross-legged on the bunk, her luminous skin casting soft shadows on the walls. She looked calmer now, but her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. Still hearing echoes, he asked softly. She nodded. The agent we escaped from, he didn't act alone. Vireka field operatives don't operate independently unless the Elder Assembly authorizes it. Which means they see you as something more than a political embarrassment, Callan finished. Serial's expression turned solemn. They see me as an anomaly, a breach of order. My bond with you violates their most sacred biological principles. To them, it's contamination. Callan folded his arms. Because I'm human. Because we proved them wrong, she said. They've spent generations insisting resonance bonds only work within Virica lineage. Now we've shown otherwise. She moved toward him, kneeling in front of him, with hands resting gently on his chest. Her light glowed in rhythm with his heartbeat. What we've done, it's more than survival. It's proof that connection isn't limited by species. It's universal. Callan swallowed hard. That scares them. It terrifies them. The hollow current docked at Station Keros after 2 more cycles. It was a patchwork construct, several retrofitted freighters joined by modular rings, rotating habitats, and thick-walled cargo pods. The place smelled of coolant and spice and ambition. As they stepped out onto the catwalks of the inner hub, a trio of station workers scanned their forged IDs without much interest. The station bustled with life merchants, mercenaries, medics, all living in the cracks between the stars. Here they were just another pair of nameless drifters. And that was what they needed. They rented a private dome within the Eastern Ring, a modest dwelling with algae-fed lighting and recycled warmth. It wasn't paradise, but it was theirs. And for the first time since that alley behind Cortex Hospital, Serial could rest without fear. They began building something new. Callan resumed repairs and small engineering contracts in the lower decks. Serial, her resonance field fully stabilized, began helping in the medical bay of an independent xenobiologist named Dr. Coral, a synth-born healer who appreciated her insight and respected her space. They made friends, shared meals, laughed. Yet the shadow of the assembly lingered, and so did the connection between them. One night under a synthetic starlight canopy, Serial took Callan's hand and placed it gently on her chest, just above where her bioluminescence swirled in soft, elegant patterns. "Feel that?" she whispered. He nodded. "It's peaceful. It's more than that," she said. "Among my people, this pattern represents a life initiation signal. It's rare, a kind of resonance feedback loop, usually only seen when a new bond begins forming, one not just between individuals, but species." Callan frowned. "You mean..." She moved his hand slightly lower toward her abdomen. He felt it then. A second distinct pulse. Not hers, not his. New. Callan froze. His breath caught. "Is that..." "Yes," she whispered. "We've created a third resonance, a life formed from both of us." For a long time, neither spoke. Then Callan broke the silence. "That's impossible," she said. "Until now." He pulled her into an embrace, heart pounding with a mix of awe, terror, and indescribable joy. "We're having a child," he whispered. "A child born of both worlds," she confirmed. "One who defies the assumptions of 2 civilizations." The moment didn't last. A station-wide alert pulsed through the corridors, an encoded signal on private frequency bands. Callan's comm unit buzzed with a message from Tessa. "They found you. Incoming Virica strike team. 2 hours out. If you want to run, this is your last window." Callan showed Serial the message. Her light dimmed. "We can't keep running." He looked into her eyes. "Then what do we do?" "We stand," she said, "and we show them that we're not afraid." They contacted Dr. Coral, Tessa, and Nix, who arrived in secret 3 hours later aboard a borrowed shuttle from a Terran humanitarian vessel. She burst into the room, all grim fury and medical scans. "You idiots bonded so hard you made a new species," she growled, arms crossed. "Do you know what that means?" Callan blinked. "You... tell us." Nix sighed and handed him a datapad. On the screen, energy signatures, DNA overlays, cross-species biointegrity. The numbers didn't lie. "You didn't just create life," Nix said. "You created compatibility. You proved that empathy, energy, and biology can fuse. You've rewritten the rules." Serial placed a hand protectively on her stomach. "And now they'll try to erase it." Nix leaned in. "Then don't let them. Go public. Let the universe see what you are. Make it impossible for them to silence you." It wasn't what they had planned, but it was right. The next morning, Callan stood in the middle of the station's public ring, where open comms fed into dozens of transgalactic channels and activated a beacon. Serial stepped beside him, hand in his, her glow radiant and bold. And then to the entire galaxy, they told their story, of the night he found her, of the hospital that abandoned her, of the vet who healed her, of the love they forged across biology and fear, of the child now growing proof of something bigger than politics or prejudice, proof of unity, hope, possibility. And as the signal broadcast out across the stars, the Virey-Ka strike vessel blinked onto the station's sensors too late to silence them before the message went galactic. On the bridge of that ship, the commander stared at the holofeed in disbelief as a dozen news aggregators picked up the story. Elder Assembly will not be pleased, a junior officer muttered. Too late, the commander said, sinking into her chair. They've already won the first battle. The viral transmission from Station Keras spread like wildfire across the net grid. Within hours, media hubs across multiple systems were replaying the message on repeat. A human man and a Virey-Ka woman bonded through resonance, expecting a child whose very existence shattered the biological and political assumptions of two civilizations. Some called it blasphemy, others called it a miracle. And for the first time in generations, the galaxy turned its eyes not to a war or treaty, but to a simple story of connection, forged in darkness, strengthened through defiance, and born of impossible unity. Inside the observation dome of Keros' central ring, Callan stood with one hand resting on the curved glass, watching stars drift past like frozen sparks. Behind him, Cyril sat in a cushioned recliner, hands cradling the soft curve of her abdomen. Her glow was no longer a thing of secrecy or suppression. She shimmered openly now, a rhythm of life and light that brought curious onlookers to tears. Her resonance, once fragile and fading, now pulsed with purpose. "Have you heard?" she said softly. Callan turned to her. Earth's Interstellar Council issued a statement this morning. They're requesting formal talks with the Virey-Ka Assembly about resonance research. Peacefully. Callan blinked. Peacefully, she nodded. They want to understand. They want to learn how we're possible. Callan came to sit beside her, wrapping an arm gently around her shoulders. And the assembly Cyril sighed, divided. Some want to challenge. Others want to study. A few, perhaps, are even hopeful. Callan chuckled dryly. We went from fugitives to diplomats in a week. She smiled. We went from strangers to something more. Everything else followed. Later that day, Tessa Rowe, Dr. Nix Barrow, and Dr. Coral joined them in the dome. Tessa carried a bottle of questionable champagne and a grin sharp enough to slice metal. You're both famous now, she said, popping the cork with a hiss of recycled air. There are posters of you two on half the mid-tier forums, Cyril glowing like a goddess, Callan standing there like he just fixed someone's toaster. Callan groaned. Please tell me they didn't use that one. They did. It's a meme now. Nix poured herself a drink. I'm just glad people are listening. For once, the universe is paying attention to something good. Coral raised a glass. To your child, to possibility, and to the trouble you're both going to cause by simply existing. They all toasted, and when the laughter faded, the silence that followed was warm. But not everyone was laughing. In the inner sanctum of the Virey-Ka Elder Assembly screens, displayed the broadcast on an endless loop. Arguments raged. The anomaly must be contained. No studied. She's become a beacon. She's become a threat. But one voice silenced the chamber. An old Virey-Ka elder stood, her skin marked with luminous lines so ancient they flickered in almost forgotten patterns. Her eyes, full of age and clarity, regarded the council with something between sadness and awe. You fear what you do not understand, she said, and what you do not control. The room quieted, but the truth has already escaped the cage. The bond has formed. The child exists. To destroy them now would not erase the evidence. It would only prove the cruelty we've long been accused of. She turned toward the star map glowing across the chamber floor. Let them be. Back aboard Station Keros, time passed. The station adapted to the attention. Security increased. Visitors poured in, journalists, scientists, artists, and diplomats. Callan and Sarael gave interviews cautiously, never letting their story be twisted into spectacle or propaganda. Instead, they spoke of compassion, of resonance, of the right to connect without borders. Cyril's pregnancy advanced quickly, her body adapting with miraculous ease. Dr. Nix monitored her daily, with Coral assisting. Together, they navigated a gestational curve neither species had encountered before. It's like the child is creating its own rules, Coral mused. She is, Sarael confirmed one day. She's writing a new kind of music. And then the time came. Cyril's resonance shifted, no longer pulsing in tranquil waves, but in sharp crescendos. She gripped Callan's hand as the med dome sealed around them, the artificial starlight dimming to a soft violet hue. Nyx and Coral moved with quiet precision, assisted by drones and calibrated resonance monitors. "It's beginning," Nyx said. "Stay with her." "I'm not going anywhere," Callan replied. Through it all, pain pressure, energy flux. Serial's focus never wavered. And when the final resonance peak crested, the room filled with a light not from any lamp or instrument, but from within her body, and within the child. She was born silently, no crying, just a shimmer, a soft, luminous glow, half human, half Vire Ka, entirely extraordinary. Serial held her close, the child blinking up at the world with eyes like mirrored starlight. Callan stood beside them, unable to speak. "She sees you," Serial whispered, her voice filled with something deeper than joy. "She knows you." Callan reached out, gently touching the child's small hand. Light pulsed through her skin in tiny spirals. New patterns, unknown languages. "She's communicating already," Coral said in wonder. "The resonance? It's intuitive." Nyx chuckled, wiping her eyes. "That's not resonance. That's love. They named her Nova because she was a star that never should have been born. And yet here she was. Proof that when species reach beyond fear, when empathy becomes stronger than biology, when one man chooses not to walk past a dying stranger in an alley, everything changes. Months later, as Serial stood beside Callan in the observation dome, Nova cradled in her arms, the station lights dimmed for evening cycle. The baby stirred, glowing faintly against Serial's chest. "She's dreaming," Serial whispered, of what Callan asked. "Of a future we haven't ruined yet." Callan smiled. "That's a good place to start." And as they stood together, three hearts in resonance, three lives defying impossibility, they became more than a family. They became a message, a quiet, stubborn flame that would never be silenced again.